At 65, I sold the hotel chain I'd built with my own two hands for $47 million. To celebrate, I invited my only child to dinner. My daughter sat across from me with a poised smile and raised her glass, toasting my success like it was her own. And then my phone rang. I stepped out to take the call. Just a minute, just a breath. And in that sliver of time, something happened that would change our lives forever. The clock started ticking toward a quiet kind of justice I never knew I had in me, a countdown to my silent revenge. But before I go on, if you're watching this and it hits home even a little, make sure you're subscribed. And please tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. It matters to me to know how far these stories travel. It makes me feel less alone. I never thought the person I loved most in the world would be capable of killing me for money. You know what I mean? You raise a child, you pour your life into them, and still life has a cruel way of letting you see that sometimes we know the people we raise less than we imagine. That realization doesn't arrive with thunder. It creeps in, quiet, cold, factual. The restaurant that night was the kind of place where silence has texture. People didn't raise their voices there. The background music was more of a breath than a melody. Linen tablecloths lay perfectly smooth and white. Silverware caught the chandelier light and returned it in little waves. I sat across from my daughter. Let's call her by the name I still hear in my sleep, Sarah. She was 38 then. I had raised her alone after my husband David died. He passed when she was 12, and suddenly I was all she had, a mother, a father, a guardian who knew where every nickel went and where every dream might land. The small beachside inn David and I once managed had, over decades of sleepless nights and stubborn mornings, become a chain of hotels. I had just signed the deal. $47 million. The end of an era, the beginning of another. To your health, Mom. Sarah's champagne glass shivered in the light. Her eyes shone in a way I took for pride. 47 million. Can you even believe it? You're incredible. We clinked, and I smiled. I took only a small sip, from cranberry juice. My cardiologist had been firm with me. No alcohol. Hypertension, a little heart murmur, numbers that like to misbehave when I wasn't looking. At my age, you learn to listen to what your body whispers before it starts to shout. Sarah looked stunning in the black dress I'd given her for her last birthday. Her hair, brown like mine at her age, was swept into a careful bun that meant she'd planned to be admired. Beside her sat Michael, her husband of 5 years. He had the sort of charming, practiced warmth that always rubbed something raw in me, although I could never seem to say exactly why. Maybe you've met someone like that. Smiles with all his teeth, eyes always calculating the room. I'm so happy you finally decided to sell, Helen, Michael said, raising his glass to join the moment. Now you can enjoy life, travel, rest. You've worked too much. I have plans, I said, and I meant it. But something about his tone, relieved instead of happy, lodged like a splinter. The David Foundation is just the beginning, I added. For a split second, something flitted across Sarah's face. Irritation, maybe, or worry. So quick, if I had blinked, I'd have missed it. Foundation? She asked, and the air around that word changed temperature. Yes, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm creating a foundation in your father's name to help orphan children. A significant part of the sale will go toward that. Michael coughed and nearly choked on his champagne. How wonderful, he managed. But there was something else in his voice, something like a draft under a door. And how much? How much exactly are you planning to donate? Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. Jessica's name lit the screen. My attorney, my friend of decades, the person who knew my family almost as well as I did. I have to take this, I said, rising. Final details. In the lobby, the signal behaved. Jessica's call was quick. Signatures, a courier, a morning timeline. I returned to the table. As I approached, Sarah and Michael's faces leaned close, their voices shaved down to urgent whispers that ended the second they saw me. "Everything okay?" I asked, sitting. "Of course, Mom." Sarah smiled, but it stopped at her cheeks. Her eyes stayed still. "I was just telling Michael how proud I am of you." I reached for my cranberry juice and paused. At the bottom of the glass, a faint residue clung like fogged sugar. I set the glass down. A mother's instinct is a body's oldest muscle. "Who wants dessert?" I asked lightly, as if nothing at all had happened, as if I hadn't just felt something coil in my stomach. We lingered another half hour. I ordered a fresh juice, told the waiter the previous one was too sweet, and watched my daughter and her husband as if they were a painting, and I was supposed to find the flaw. You could have called their smiles polite. I'd have called them tight. Hands fidgeted with napkins. Michael's gaze kept sliding toward the door. When we finally said our goodbyes under the restaurant's warm awning, Sarah hugged me, hard. "I love you, Mom," she said in my ear. For a tiny moment, the memory of her at 5, milk mustache, skinned knee, rose up like a wave, and I almost believed her completely. I climbed into my car and waited, lights off, watching their taillights disappear around the corner. I was putting the key in the ignition when someone tapped my window. It was Anthony, our waiter. There was a grave kindness in his face that startled me. I rolled the window down. "Yes?" "Mrs. Helen," he said softly. His eyes flicked toward the restaurant like he was afraid of the building itself. "Forgive me for intruding, but there's something I need to tell you." "What is it, Anthony?" He hesitated, then swallowed like the truth hurt his throat. "When you stepped out to take your call, I was coming by with a tray. I saw your daughter take a small vial from her purse and tip a white powder into your glass. Her husband was watching the room, like a lookout. You know that feeling when the world goes completely quiet?" My blood ran cold, even though some part of me had already known, seeing the residue, feeling the wrongness. But a witness turns suspicion into a fact you can hold. "Are you absolutely sure?" My voice barely made it out of me. He nodded, steady. "I've worked here 15 years. I don't meddle in customers' lives, but I couldn't stay silent." "Did you tell anyone else?" "No, ma'am. I came straight to you. I thought you should know." "Anthony, would you mind if I kept the glass to have it tested?" "I already took care of that." He reached into his pocket and produced a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside lay my glass, the thin pink remainder of cranberry juice clinging to its sides. "I was going to suggest the same. If you want it analyzed, you have the proof." My hands trembled as I took it. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. Just be careful." He gave me one last worried look and slipped back inside. I sat there for a long time, the evidence bag on my lap, my heart knocking unevenly. Tears came, hot, then colder than ice. Not grief, fury, a strange, precise kind of rage that narrowed my thoughts to a single bright point, the kind of rage that doesn't scream, it plans. I called Jessica. She answered on the second ring. "You were right," I said. Silence. Heavy, old, exhausted. Jessica had been trying to warn me for months about Sarah and Michael's debts, about how they'd gotten warmer when the sale rumors first floated, and downright attentive when the numbers became real. I hadn't wanted to hear it. What mother does? "How much time do you think we have?" she asked finally. "Not much," I said. "They'll try again." "What do you want to do, Helen?" I looked at the bag, at the ghost of pink, pooled at the bottom of the glass, at the way my daughter's hands had done that. "I want them to pay," I said. My voice surprised me. It was the sound of steel wrapped in velvet. "Not with prison. That would be too easy. I want them to feel every grain of the poison they tried to give me." The next morning I took the glass to a private lab, the kind that minds its own business if you set enough crisp bills on the counter. "Full analysis," I told the young tech with square glasses. "No questions. I need results today." While I waited, I sat in a corner booth at a cafe where nobody knew my name. My phone rang. Sarah. "Mom, are you okay? You didn't look so good last night." Concern took up space in her voice like an actor in the wrong role. "I'm fine, honey," I said, keeping my tone light as air. "Just tired, going to rest today." "Oh, good. I thought you might be—" She paused, searching, I don't know, sick or something. Disappointed. "I'm not dead," I thought, and smiled to myself. Out loud I said, "Not at all. I feel great." Silence stretched. "And that foundation," she said finally, casual as a stray bullet. Is that really something you want to do right now? You just sold the hotels. Maybe it's better to rest before starting new projects." Ah, there it was. Not love, not relief, money, always money. "It's already in motion," I said. "In fact, I'm going to sign some documents with Jessica right now." Another pause. Longer. How much are you putting in, Mom?" I closed my eyes so she wouldn't hear the crack inside me. 30 million, I said smoothly, on purpose, a spark to dry kindling. "It's a good start," her breath caught. 30 million? "But Mom, that's almost everything. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You can't just—" "I have to go, dear. The taxi's here." I hung up softly. Now I knew my value. To my daughter, $47 million, no more, no less. 3 hours later, the lab called. "Results are ready." The tech handed me an envelope with hands that shook a little. He knew what he'd found. "Ma'am, this is—" "Thank you," I said, and paid what I owed. In my car, I opened the envelope. The words were precise, clinical, devastating. Propranolol in a concentration 10 times the therapeutic dose. Dangerous enough to plunge a heart like mine into bradycardia, to drag my blood pressure to the floor, to push a murmur into quiet. In other words, a natural death. An older woman, sudden windfall, a touch of stress, a sad heart attack. The perfect plan. If you don't mind murder. Sarah knew my medical history. She'd studied nursing for 2 semesters before dropping out. She knew exactly what would look clean. I drove straight to Jessica's office downtown. She was waiting behind her oak desk, glasses low on her nose, gaze like a scalpel. "Well?" she asked, although the set of her mouth said she already knew. I slid the report across. She read, and the only sign she'd reached the cliff's edge was a tiny tightening around her lips. "Propranolol," she said. "Interesting. Hard to catch in a routine autopsy." "She'd know that," I replied. "She took enough classes." "What do you want to do?" "We're not going to the police," I said before she could offer it. "I won't make this a spectacle. I won't watch my daughter in handcuffs on the evening news. I won't see the name I built dragged through the mud." "Then what?" "You told me they're in trouble." I nodded toward the city, toward the expensive lives that eat their owners. "How deep?" Jessica opened a drawer and set a thick folder between us. I already initiated a financial sweep. I turned pages. The picture built itself, maxed out cards, Loans from men who don't send polite reminders, a luxury car living on hopes and extensions, a condo teetering on foreclosure, trips charged to future miracles, dinners meant to impress strangers, brands in the closets, nothing in the bank, a life decorated and hollow. "They're bankrupt," I said. "Desperate," Jessica confirmed. "When you mentioned a foundation, that was the trigger." They realized they were losing their lifeline. We sat in a silence that felt like sitting in a church after everyone has gone home. What saddened me most wasn't the attempt on my life. It was that they hadn't needed to do it. "If they'd come to me," I whispered, "I would have helped. I always helped." "Some people are blinded by greed," Jessica said gently. "They can't see past it." I straightened. The decision inside me hardened, cooled. Draft a new will and call them to your conference room tomorrow morning. Tell them we're reconsidering the foundation amounts. Jessica lifted an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" "Something they won't forget," I said. "A lesson about consequences." On my way home, my phone chimed. A text from Sarah. "Mom, can we have dinner tonight? Michael and I want to talk about some plans for your future." "Plans for my future or the lack of it?" I typed back. "I'm a little unwell." "Tomorrow 10 a.m. at Jessica's office?" Her reply came fast. "Sure, Mom. Rest up. We love you so much. We love you so much." Words that weigh nothing when the hands that write them know the price of your life to the dollar. The next morning I woke up strangely light. Not happy exactly, no, but clear. I dressed in a gray suit, hair in a simple bun, no makeup to blur the lines time had drawn. I wanted my daughter to see exactly who she'd tried to kill, an aging mother with a beating heart that still chose its own rhythm. Jessica waited in reception. "They're already in the conference room," she murmured. "They seem anxious." "They should be." I touched my purse. Inside, the lab report. "How long until Mr. Miller gets here?" 10 minutes. He'll wait downstairs for my signal." We had hired a former federal investigator. Nothing official, nothing that would stand in a court on its own, but enough to hold up a mirror and make them look. We entered. Sarah stood quickly. She wore a pale blue dress, the kind of color people call innocent. Michael's suit was dark and exact. They could have been photographed for a bank ad about trust. "Mom." Sarah moved to hug me. I took a half step back that only a mother would notice. She blinked and turned the motion into pulling out my chair. "Feeling better?" she asked, voice trained to care. "Much," I said. "It's amazing what a good night's sleep can do." Michael smiled too wide. We were worried. Worried I was still breathing, I thought, and folded my hands. Jessica took her place next to me, all calm competence. "As you know, Helen asked me to revisit some financial plans after the sale." Sarah's eyes brightened, hope like a flashbulb. Michael sat straighter. "Helen initially intended to allocate a significant portion of the proceeds to the David Foundation." "30 million, Sarah cut in, the tremor in her voice a thread she couldn't hide. "Mom, that's too much. I mean, of course it's your money. I didn't mean—" I lifted a hand. "There's been a change of plans," I said evenly. "I realize I may have been hasty." Sarah leaned forward. "Really?" "Yes. There are things you only see when you've stood on the edge and looked over." The room tightened. Michael swallowed. Sarah's smile faltered just enough to tell the truth. "What do you mean, Mom? You look wonderful." Instead of answering, I opened my purse and placed the report on the table. I slid it across until it touched the space between them. "Do you know what this is?" Sarah looked at it like it might hiss. Michael didn't move. If stone could sweat, that was him. "It's a toxicology report," I said. my voice a chalk line on a blackboard. An analysis of my cranberry juice from the night before last. Propranolol, in a dose that could stop a heart like mine. The color drained from my daughter's face, gone as if someone had pulled a plug. Michael's jaw clenched, then unclenched. "Mom, I don't," Sarah stammered. "Is this a joke? Jessica, is this a joke?" I tilted my head. "No, and neither is the fact that you're drowning in debt, or that you tried to poison me before I wasted your inheritance on a stupid foundation." Michael started to push back his chair. Jessica's palm lifted 2 inches off the table. Her voice cut the air. "I strongly suggest you stay seated. It will only get worse if you don't." Sarah cried then, big glossy tears. She always cried beautifully. "Mom, I would never, never. If I hadn't had the waiter's words, if I hadn't had the science, maybe I would have folded like I had 100 times before. But mothers grow new bones when the old ones break." "Anthony saw you," I said, and her name in my mouth felt different than it ever had. "He saw you pour the powder while Michael watched the room." The silence that followed was like a vacuum. Then Sarah's face changed. You know when you watch the ocean from a pier and the tide turns? It was like that, quiet and total. Fear receded. Calculation took its place. She was measuring outcomes. "This is ridiculous," Michael said, his voice striving for outraged but landing on thin. "You're accusing us of attempted murder based on a waiter who could be lying? A lab report that could be faked?" Jessica smiled without warmth. "That's why we have another guest." She pressed a button. The door opened. A tall man in a simple suit entered, carrying a folder twin to Jessica's. "Charles Miller," she said, "former federal investigator. He's been looking into a few things for the last 48 hours. Sarah's eyes widened. Michael's hand found the edge of the table like he needed to feel wood. "Google's very educational," I said quietly. He found searches on Michael's laptop. Propranolol in patients with heart disease. Therapeutic dose. Overdose signs. How long does propranolol last in the body? He found a pharmacy across town where Emily Hart bought an odd amount of propranolol not long ago. He found debt, more than 2 million, owed to people who don't file polite invoices. Michael began to tremble so softly you'd only see it if you loved him. Sarah stared somewhere past us, as if the far wall had a door to a life she could still sprint into. "What do you want?" she asked at last, voice low, gone flat. I looked at her, truly looked, the little girl holding my hand on the beach, the teenager rolling her eyes and asking for the expensive thing because everyone has one. The bride, the woman across from me now. "I want to understand," I said, and felt the truth tear on the way out. How did my daughter get here? How did money become more important than love, more important than family, more important than me? She met my eyes. No tears, no pretense, just cold, like steel under winter sun. "You want to know why?" Her voice was unnervingly calm. "Because you cared more about your hotels, your money, your legacy, than you ever cared about me. After Dad died, you drowned in work. You promised that one day it would all be mine, and then you decide to hand it to a foundation." Her words hit me like a wave that doesn't stop at your ankles, but knocks you clear off your feet. Was that really what she believed? That my work, which I did to keep us afloat, was abandonment? "Sarah," I said, "I worked so you wouldn't have to be afraid, so you'd have opportunities I never had." "And look where that got us," she said, almost laughing. "You with your millions, and me trying to kill you so I wouldn't lose everything." The room stopped breathing. Michael turned to her, face white. "Sarah, shut up," he hissed. "You're confessing." She gave a sound that used to be a laugh. "What difference does it make?" She flicked her eyes at the folders, at Charles, at the report. She already knows. I felt something inside me settle. Not peace. No. Something colder. You have two options, I said. One, we call the police right now. With what we have, the DA will put a bow on it. You will go to prison. Sarah looked at the table. Michael looked at the door. Neither of them moved. Two, I continued. You sign documents that Jessica prepared. You confess in writing, detail for detail. We keep it in a safe. If anything happens to me, anything at all, that document goes straight to the authorities. In return, Michael's voice was a thread. In return, you disappear from my life. No texts, no birthdays, no calls, no money. You leave the country. You start over, far away from me. Jessica slid a thick stack of papers across the table. The confession, the agreement, the consequences, the small print that is not small when it's your life. And the money? Sarah asked finally, lifting her eyes to mine. Not sorry, not forgive me. Money. The bulk goes to the David Foundation, I said, but I will pay your debts, not out of generosity. To keep the wolves you invited from my door, that's it. Then we're done. Michael wet his lips. Can we have a moment? No, Jessica said, her voice turning iron. Decide now, or we call the police. Silence pressed on our eardrums. Sarah reached for the pen. We don't have a choice, she told Michael, and started to sign. I watched the pen move and felt an emptiness open like an elevator shaft. There would be no reconciliation arc, no music swelling, no last-minute hug. Some endings are just endings. Jessica gathered the papers. Mr. Miller will accompany you to collect essentials. You have 48 hours to leave the country. If you don't, we turn everything over. Michael nodded, beaten. Sarah kept her eyes on the table like the wood might forgive her if I wouldn't. One last thing, I said, standing as they did. That story you told yourself, the abandoned daughter, you know it isn't true. I gave you everything. She looked up then, and for the first time I saw what had always been there, a kind of emptiness, like a room without furniture. Because it was easier, she said, easier than working, than saving, than building from scratch like you did. Easier than admitting we wrecked our finances, easier than facing reality. Her words hung between us like a chemical in the air. Goodbye, Sarah, I said. Each word weighed what it weighed. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. She didn't answer. She followed Michael and Charles out. The door clicked. I stood in a room where a mother and a daughter used to exist. Jessica and I sat in the aftermath. She took my hand. Are you okay? I shook my head. The tears I wouldn't let fall in front of my daughter came now, quiet and relentless. She drove me home. Outside the window, life kept happening. Teenagers testing boundaries, mothers tugging little hands back from curbs. All so ordinary it almost hurt to look at. 2 weeks went by. Charles confirmed they'd left for Portugal. I paid the debts, not to be kind, but to be safe. My days arranged themselves. Morning walks along the beach near my house. Afternoons sketching the shape of the David Foundation. Evenings on my balcony with tea, watching the sea fold in and out like breath, asking myself how in the world we had gotten here. One night, Jessica arrived unannounced, folder under her arm, purpose in her step. She set it on my table. Enough, she said. It's time to live again. What's this? Projects. She opened the folder. For the foundation. Ways to turn all that pain into something useful. A shelter for children. Scholarships. A training center. Why now? Because you're drowning in sadness and guilt, she said, kind and blunt at once. And you're asking a question with no answer. Where did I go wrong? Some people make bad choices. No matter how they were raised, no matter how loved they were, they choose wrong. I looked at the proposals. Each page was a door. I don't know if I have the strength. She smiled like she'd seen me move mountains. You built an empire after your husband died. You raised a daughter on your own. You sat across from that daughter while she signed her way out of your life instead of into a prison cell. You have the strength. That night, while Jessica slept in the guest room, I sat at my desk and started writing in the margins of those proposals. I made lists. I asked questions. I wrote yes in capital letters on the ones that made my heart lift half an inch. By morning, I'd chosen the first direction. The shelter, I told Jessica over coffee. There's a plot near downtown that's perfect. If we move fast, we can break ground in a month. Welcome back, she said, and meant it. A year passed the way years do, slow until suddenly. Fall into winter, winter into spring. On a sunny April morning, I parked in front of a construction site wrapped in cheerful fencing. A banner announced, "Future Home of the David Miller Children's Home," an initiative of the David Foundation. Hard hats, rebar, the smell of sawdust and wet earth. Jessica met me at the entrance, wearing jeans and a blazer like she always meant business even on a Saturday. Ready for the tour? She handed me a helmet. The chief engineer joined us, blueprint in hand. Foundations poured. First floor walls taking shape. Electrical rough-in scheduled for next week. Roof before the June rains, he promised. I stood where the front door would be and pictured rooms that felt like an embrace instead of an institution. Cozy beds for 50 kids, a library with corners to read in, a dining hall where laughter bounced off walls, not loneliness. And the garden? I asked. He pointed to the center of the lot. An old yellow wood tree rose there, stubborn and beautiful. Preserved, he said. Just like you asked, we built around it. That tree reminded me of the one David and I planted in the backyard when Sarah was a baby. I rested my palm on its bark. You're going to see so many birthdays, I told it, so many second chances. Afterward, we had lunch at a little place nearby. Jessica slid a semi-annual report across the table. 25 scholarships awarded. A community center renovation underway. The shelter on track. Donations coming in from other business owners who seemed to catch whatever fire I'd lit. Finances are solid, she said. You inspired people, Helen. I just did what David and I promised each other we'd do if we ever could, I said. I could feel him near me in moments like that. Not a ghost, just the shape of the love that built the first inn and never left. There's something else, Jessica said, hesitating. News about Sarah and Michael. My heart snagged like a sweater on a nail. What happened? They split, she said gently. Michael came back to the States, Chicago, with his parents. Sarah stayed in Portugal. She got a job as a hotel receptionist in Lisbon. I sat there with that. I didn't feel triumphant, not even relieved, just sad in a clean way. Did she ask about me? Jessica shook her head. No. That night on my balcony, the sea doing its endless work, the phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Helen Miller? A young woman's voice. Yes. My name is Lily Carter. I'm one of the David Foundation scholarship recipients. I smiled. Those calls were my favorite. Hello, Lily. How did you get my number? Dr. Jessica gave it to me, she said quickly. She thought I should speak to you directly about a project. Jessica always did love to play matchmaker, of ideas, of people, of purpose. Go on. I'm a medical student, Lily said, and I'm working in a lab that's developing a technique for regenerating damaged heart tissue. We're at a crossroads with funding. I'm hoping you might visit, just an hour. I think you'd see what I see. It could save lives. It could save families from what you went through with Mr. David." The way she said my husband's name made something warm and painful move in my chest. "When?" "Tomorrow, if you can. We're running an important experiment. I don't usually change my schedule for strangers, but loss recognizes anyone trying to keep other people from feeling it." "Text me the address," I said. 10 a.m. The campus was green and glass and humming with youth. Lily waited at the lab doors, mid-20s, dark hair in a ponytail, eyes that shone with the kind of purpose you can't fake, white coat over a simple blouse. She stuck out her hand. "It's such an honor to meet you." "The honor's mine," I said, and meant it within 2 minutes. The lab was a small city of machines and minds. Behind a glass partition, a device pulsed gently like a tiny mechanical heart, practicing for the real thing. "We're developing scaffolds seeded with a patient's own stem cells," she explained, so clear I could almost feel myself understanding the science. "We're seeing promising integration with damaged myocardium in preclinical models." For 2 hours she moved me through stations, introducing researchers by name, explaining every step without condescension. You know when someone loves what they do so much that you feel lucky just to stand nearby? It was like that. "How much do you need to take the next step?" I asked finally in her little office with the plant in the window that had somehow survived winter. She bit her lip. 600,000. It would hire 2 more researchers and buy the equipment to begin preliminary clinical trials in a year. "It's a lot," I said, "and it's nothing, depending on what it becomes." "Our grant applications are pending," she said, "but they move slowly. People die while we wait." "People like David," I said, and we both knew I wasn't talking about hypotheticals. There was something about her that tugged at a thread in my memory, a tilt of the head, a shape around the eyes. "Jessica speaks highly of you," I said. "What else did she tell you about me?" Lily hesitated. "That you built your company with Mr. David, that you created this foundation to honor him, and—" She took a breath. "And about your daughter." The office got small. "What exactly did she tell you?" "That there was a poisoning attempt," she said quietly, "and that you chose a different kind of justice." "And why did you ask her for something so personal?" I asked. My voice had edges. "Because I needed to understand who you were before I met you," she said. Then she opened her desk drawer and took out a small framed photograph. She handed it to me. A young couple in front of a simple house. A tall, gray-haired man with a protective arm around a smiling young woman. The photo was old, and the edges had softened. "Who are they?" I asked, though the truth had already risen like a tide. "My parents," Lily said softly. "Or rather, the people who raised me. My adoptive parents." I looked up sharply, and in her face I finally saw what had been whispering to me since she shook my hand. The line of her jaw, the warmth and resolve mixed together. I stopped, because the word in my throat was mine. "Your granddaughter," she said, meeting my eyes without flinching. "Sarah had me when she was 17. She couldn't or wouldn't raise me. I was adopted by a family in rural Ohio. I sat back like my body needed more distance for the shock to fit. A granddaughter. While I was counting bookings and balancing ledgers and saving for colleges that never got used, my blood was out in the world, learning to become a doctor." "Sarah never told me," I whispered. "She never said a word." "I found you 2 years ago," Lily said. "My parents always told me I was adopted. When I turned 25, they gave me the file with my biological mother's name, Sarah Miller. I didn't plan to look, not really. I had a good life. But I'm a doctor. Family history matters. I followed the thread. It led to you. Then I met Dr. Jessica through a scholarship. At first, she was just the director who signed forms and asked smart questions. Months later, I told her. She helped me figure out how to come to you in a way that might be easier. The research is real, she added quickly, a blush rising. This isn't a trick. We do need the funding. But yes, she thought it would be less abrupt than knocking on your door and saying, "Hi, I'm your granddaughter." I had to laugh, even with my heart pounding. That was so like Jessica. Two birds with one elegant plan. Have you spoken to Sarah? The words came before I could protect myself from the answer. I tried, Lily said. I flew to Portugal 3 months ago and found her. She refused to meet. She said that part of her life is closed. I closed my eyes. What do you do with a child who keeps choosing the door marked exit? You stop standing in front of it. I'm sorry, I said, taking Lily's hand because it needed to be held. No one deserves that. It's okay, she said, and I could tell she meant it will be okay more than it is. I'm not looking for a mother. I just thought, maybe you would want to know. I looked at her, this brilliant, kind, stubborn young woman, and felt something shift inside me. A knot loosened that I didn't know I'd tied. I would love to know my granddaughter, I said, voice thick, not just as a funder, as a grandmother. Her smile broke over both of us like sunlight on water. It reminded me of Sarah when she was small, before the world got reflective and sharp. As for the project, I added, because Jessica would ask me the second I left the building, consider it funded. We'll handle the paperwork. The next weeks were a roller coaster I almost enjoyed. Lily and I moved from formal to familiar like a camera pulling into focus. I learned she made the world's best lasagna. She learned David made the world's best Sunday sauce. We cooked in my kitchen with the windows open. We laughed while we chopped onions and told stories over simmering pots. We went through photo albums, our faces appearing and reappearing across time like a family playing peekaboo with itself. What was she like as a kid? Lily asked one night, careful with the question, stirring pasta like it was fragile. Vibrant, I said. Curious. Not great at homework, creative at everything else. After David died, she changed. Quieter sometimes, meaner other times. She wanted more. Always more. Do you think you could have prevented it? Lily asked. And I recognized the doctor in the way she very gently pressed on a bruise. I've asked myself that 1,000 nights, I admitted. Where did I go wrong? As a doctor, I've learned that people are a mix of genetics, chemistry, and choices, she said. You can do everything right and still get a child who chooses wrong. Look at me. Same biology, different outcome. That's not just nurture. That's the messy miracle of being human. It was like someone loosened a belt around my chest I'd forgotten I was wearing. Thank you, I said, and she squeezed my hand like that's what families do. Pass strength across the table in handfuls. A year after our first meeting, the David Miller Children's Home opened its doors. Balloons bobbed on strings. The old yellowwood tree stood like a blessing in the garden. Kids, 30 to start, ran from their rooms to the library, to the playground and back, discovering that safety is a place you can learn. Jessica stood beside me with a small smile that meant, we did it. Worth it? She asked. Every penny, I said. Lily arrived with her parents, Mary and Charles Carter, my granddaughter's mother and father, in every way that matters. Mary ignored my extended hand and wrapped me in a hug that told me who she was in 1 second flat. What a blessing to meet you, she said, and I had to blink fast. Charles, tall, neat, with a manager's posture, shook my hand like we were colleagues about to open a property together. We toured the rooms. Mary touched quilts, like she was checking their warmth for winter. Charles asked questions only someone who'd spent decades on a hotel floor would know to ask, about maintenance schedules and laundry workflows, and what you do when the dishwasher breaks at 7 p.m. on a weekday with 45 plates left to go. "You succeeded," Mary said, standing at the foot of a bed made up with a stuffed bear propped on the pillow. "This isn't an institution. This is a home." After the ribbon cutting and photographs and speeches that made my throat feel bruised, we held a lunch under the yellow woods shade. We broke bread with donors, staff, city officials, and the children who would change the acoustics of these halls. "Lily tells me you managed a hotel for 35 years, I said to Charles, pouring lemonade. "Started as a receptionist," he said proudly. "Ended as general manager. We wrote reservations in a big paper ledger back then," he laughed. "Kids today think manual is a myth." We swapped war stories, guests who locked themselves out without pants, boilers that died in January, the art of keeping a place clean enough to feel like nobody lives there and warm enough to feel like everybody could. Mary leaned in at one point and spoke with the bravery of a good mother. "I worried when Lily told us about you," she said softly. "I thought, will this rich, important woman try to take our place? But then I saw this." She waved a hand across the garden, the laughter, the building that hadn't existed a year ago. "Someone who builds this isn't trying to take anything. She's trying to give." It was one of the kindest things anyone's ever said to me. "It was Lily who gave me back hope," I said. "After Sarah, I thought I'd be alone with my anger forever." "Children heal us," Mary said, "even when they aren't ours by blood." Later, when the speeches were done and the cake plates had been stacked, Lily pulled me aside in the garden's quiet. "Our cardiac regeneration project has been approved for preliminary clinical trials," she said, her voice barely containing her smile. "Lily," I breathed. "I wanted to tell you in person," she said. "We have our first volunteers, patients who haven't responded to conventional treatment. In 3 weeks we start." I hugged her. "Your grandfather would be so proud," I said, and it hurt in a sweet way to say his name in the future tense. Her face changed a little. "I got an email from Sarah," she said carefully. The world tilted half an inch. In a year, there'd been no word except for the updates we paid for. "What did she say?" "She said she saw an article about our research. She said she was proud." Lily looked torn between two truths. "Did you reply?" "Not yet. I don't know if I should." "What does your heart tell you?" I asked. It wasn't my decision to make, and I'd learned something about love in the last year. It doesn't protect by locking doors. It protects by teaching how to open them wisely. "A part of me wants to answer," she said. "Another part remembers being refused, and it hurts." "Both parts are honest," I said. "Maybe reply, but keep your boundaries like guardrails. Not every road needs to lead somewhere. Some just need clear signs." She nodded. "What about you, if she reached out?" A year ago, I would have said no. So fast the door would have shut on my own fingers. Now I looked at the home we built, the girl who called me grandma, the parents who raised her right. "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. I really don't. We linked arms and went back to the party, the two of us carrying something new, the knowledge that from betrayal, sometimes, you can still grow a life. The poison she offered me had become a catalyst. My days were no longer organized around loss. They were organized around the work of love, and love is work, but it pays in a currency you can take with you. If you're still with me, thank you. And if you've ever been through something like this, if you've had to rebuild after someone you raised tried to break you, you're not alone. Not today, not here. The weeks that followed the home's opening unfolded like a long exhale after holding my breath for years. The halls filled with laughter and little footsteps, the kind of sounds that remind you why life keeps insisting on itself. Each morning, I'd walk through the garden where the yellow wood trees stood and watch the children chase each other in circles. I'd run my hand along its rough bark, grounding myself in its strength. The tree had survived storms, just as I had. Lily visited often, balancing her time between the hospital, the university lab, and the foundation. She'd come over in the evenings, bringing news about her research, and sometimes a bottle of red wine she knew I'd never drink, but liked to see on the table for tradition's sake. We'd sit on the balcony, sharing the kind of quiet only two people bound by loss and second chances can understand. One evening, she brought her laptop and opened a folder filled with photos and data charts. "Look," she said, turning the screen toward me. "These are the first scans. The patients are responding. The tissue is integrating better than we'd hoped." I leaned in, not pretending to understand all the details, but feeling her excitement like a pulse under my own skin. "So it's working," I said softly. "You're really saving hearts." She smiled, that familiar tilt of her mouth that reminded me so much of Sarah when she was little, before everything broke. "We're saving futures," she said, "and you're part of it." That night after she left, I sat alone by the window for a long time. The city lights flickered on the water like scattered stars. I thought about how strange it was that the very thing that had once nearly ended my life, heart medicine, was now at the center of my granddaughter's mission to save others. Life had a cruel kind of symmetry, but sometimes it found its balance. A few months later, Jessica came to see me at the foundation's office. She looked the same as always, immaculate, brisk, holding her coffee like it was both weapon and shield. "I've just come from the post office," she said, setting a plain envelope on my desk. "This came from Lisbon." My heart skipped. "From Sarah?" She nodded. "I thought you might want to open it privately." I stared at it for a long moment. The handwriting was neat, familiar. I'd seen it on birthday cards, shopping lists, report cards. For a few seconds, my fingers refused to move. Finally, I slid a letter opener under the seal. There were only 2 pages. No greetings, no apologies, just Sarah's voice, calm and deliberate, like someone talking through glass. "Mom, I heard about the foundation and about Lily. She came to see me again a few weeks ago. I didn't know how to face her before, but she's remarkable. You must be proud. I wanted you to know I'm okay. I'm working. I'm sober. I live in a small apartment near the river. It's not much, but it's mine. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't think I deserve it. But I do think about you every day. If it helps, I'm sorry. Sarah." That was all. I sat there, the words vibrating in the air around me. Not enough to erase what had happened. Not nearly, but enough to stir something fragile I'd thought had turned to stone. Jessica watched me quietly. "Do you want to reply?" I folded the letter back into the envelope. "Not yet," I said, "but I think I will." That summer, the home hosted its first big community day. Volunteers came with boxes of toys and food. Local musicians played under the tree. The children ran wild with paintbrushes, turning the sidewalks into a rainbow of chalk dreams. Lily was everywhere, organizing, laughing, her hair pulled up in a messy bun that somehow made her look even more like Sarah at that age. As the sun dipped low, she came to find me. "Grandma," she said, breathless, "you need to see this." She led me into the common room, where one of the older boys, a shy, quiet child named Mateo, was playing the piano. It was a melody I hadn't heard in decades, the song David used to hum when he tucked Sarah into bed. I felt tears spill before I could stop them. Lily noticed. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I whispered. "I just didn't expect to hear that again." "He learned it from an old music book," she said softly. "Said it made him feel calm. David's song, played by a child who'd never known him. The past, reborn in small hands." I stood there, surrounded by laughter and music and the kind of warmth you can't buy, and I realized something. Maybe this was forgiveness. Not words or apologies, but life continuing, new, bright, and unbroken. The years that followed blurred together like brushstrokes on a painting. The foundation grew. The shelter expanded to house 70 children. The scholarship program tripled. Lily's research reached national attention. A major medical journal published her findings, and she was invited to speak at conferences. Every headline with her name on it felt like redemption for generations. Once, when we were watching a documentary together, she said, "You know, Grandma, sometimes I think about Sarah, about how different things could have been if she'd made different choices." I nodded. "I think about that too, but then I think, if she hadn't made those choices, maybe you wouldn't be here. Maybe I never would have found you." She smiled. "Do you ever wish you could change the past?" I thought about it, about David, about Sarah, about the poison in the glass and the kindness of a waiter who changed everything. "No," I said finally. "If I changed one thing, I might lose everything I've found." When I turned 70, the children at the home threw a surprise party. They made a banner out of construction paper that read, "Happy Birthday, Miss Helen," and baked a lopsided cake covered in sprinkles. Lily gave a speech that had everyone in tears. "My grandmother taught me that you can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose what you build from it," she said. And she built hope. I couldn't speak for a moment. All I could do was look around the room, at the kids, the staff, Jessica, Mary, and Charles, and at Lily, my granddaughter, my miracle. There it was, everything I'd lost and somehow regained. Later, after everyone left, I stood alone in the courtyard. The yellow wood tree shimmered under the string lights, leaves whispering in the breeze. I reached out and touched its trunk. "I did it, David," I said softly. "We did." That night, before bed, I sat at my desk and took out a sheet of paper. I wrote a letter, this time to Sarah. "Sarah, I received your letter a while ago. I wasn't ready to answer then. Maybe I still am not, but I think it's time. I can't erase what happened, and I won't pretend to understand it. But I do understand that people change, and that sometimes the hardest thing to do is face what we've done and keep living anyway. I hope you're finding peace in the life you've built. I hope you know that I did forgive you long before I was ready to say it out loud. Not for you, for me. Because anger is a kind of poison, too. I have a granddaughter, your daughter. Her name is Lily. She's brilliant and kind and brave, and she's carrying the best of both of us forward. I hope someday you'll want to know her the way I do. If that day ever comes, the door will be open. With love, Mom. I folded it carefully, sealed it, and gave it to Jessica the next morning. "If you can find an address," I said, "send it." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's time." A year later, I received a small package from Portugal. Inside was a photograph. Sarah standing by the ocean, her hair loose, her face older, softer. There was no note, just the image, and on the back a single word written in her handwriting. "Thank you." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the photo in my hands, the sunlight spilling across it. I realized I was smiling, not because the pain was gone, but because life had done what it always does. It had found its way back to meaning. I placed the photo in the family album between one of David and me at our first inn and one of Lily in her lab coat, grinning beside a chart full of data that was changing the world. 3 generations, 3 lives, a broken chain, mended not by denial, but by love finding new shapes. Sometimes when I walk through the children's home, I stop in the garden where the yellowwood tree stands. The kids call it Helen's tree. They tie ribbons to its branches, each ribbon a wish, a secret, or a hope. I read them sometimes when no one's looking. One morning I found a new one tied close to the trunk. The handwriting was careful, almost shaky. For my mother, for the chance she gave me to try again. Sarah. The wind rustled through the leaves, and I closed my eyes. I could almost feel her there, not the daughter who tried to kill me, but the one who used to dance barefoot in the sand, laughing until she hiccuped. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt peace. So if you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Maybe it reminded you of something or someone. Maybe it helped you believe that even the deepest betrayals can turn into something worth living for. If you've ever been through something like this, just remember, you're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories about resilience, forgiveness, and unexpected second chances, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now go tell someone you love them while you still can.